Indigenous communities. But particularly what we're going to delve into in this topic is we're going to look at sustainability, right? Funding, right? And I want to emphasize is that we're not here to, make a point or to advocate, but actually what I want to do is just raise the awareness about some of the challenges. And the number one challenge probably is funding, right? Getting funding and making things sustainable, right? And then building an organization. And when an organization has to deploy, there are other challenges. Those are aspect to regulatory. So that's what we're going to delve into today. So right now, and so I hope everybody's ready. So we have one virtual participant, Sally. We will only be able to hear her voice. So in her situation, she doesn't have the bandwidth to support the video portion. So I want to introduce our first panelist, Geoffrey Blackwell. Geoffrey is formerly with the FCC and now works with AMERIND, excuse me, yeah. And so, Geoffrey, thank you for coming. Next we have Godfrey. Godfrey is the manager for Mescalero Apache Telecom. And so it's an actual telephone company, and so kind of what I would deem as industrial grade, kind of above well, not above, but the next step after, I guess, a community network, right? And so we'll hear the challenges from Godfrey of building a Mescalero and the challenges that he's facing today as a telecom company. So, and then we have Lyle. Lyle has started his company. He started his own company, and so we'll look at the challenges of actual telephone company and how we go forward. And then we have Sally. Sally will be looking at some of the funding issues as we go forward and how she's overcoming those issues with funding and getting access to funding with her organization. So let me begin first, and let me have Kyle again introduce himself, or Lyle, I'm sorry. I don't know where I get this from. Lyle, please introduce yourself. Tell us about your company, and let us know about some of the biggest barriers that you face, and some of the things that you are now facing, and the challenges of what you built, and how successful you were in building it, but the major challenges of connectivity. Lyle.
Hi. Sagoti. Tia masi de bachinya sezi. Yet de Katlotech denende. Hote. Hi, my name's Lyle Fabian, my Canadian English name, or French Canadian for English name. My Dene name is Batjinya, which means small tree. And I come from the Northwest Territories and was, from my community, Katlotech First Nation. We are a small First Nation of 600 people. 300 live on, 300 live off. We reside next to a town called the town of Hay River, which is about 3,500 people. And we are the southernmost community in the Northwest Territories. One of the biggest issues that we had for our community was, again, connectivity. In 2006, when I started to work for my community, we were dealing with dial-up, dial tones, and et cetera, and that was when Northwest Tel started to phase in DSL internet, and it was the next great big thing. But unfortunately, my community wasn't going to be able to get access, and yet when we asked for services, it was a bit spotty all over the place. And in 2009, from 2006 and 2009, DSL has started to become better, faster, and was, better than dial-up. And then I came to the table with my community and said, what can we do to help build a community network, and what would that look like? And we went to the federal funding agencies, and I helped put together the proposal to help build the network, a community-based network, which was a wireless network. Back then, 54 megabyte symmetrical was a big jump in regards to 1.5 megs on DSL, and we're still being offered 3 megs in the community. But from that, we went from wireless to fiber optic, and we again asked the question. We asked the incumbent, what would it take for you guys to put in fiber in our community, and they said it's not viable. The return on investment is not there, but if you want to pursue it, pay us $3 million, and we'll solve the solution for you. And I'm like, $3 million bucks. I'm like, yeah, let me break open the First Nations checkbook, no problem. And that wasn't going to happen. So we decided that to go back to the federal funding agency and said, we built the wireless network. We want to learn how to build a fiber optic network. So they gave us a small grant, and that small grant, what we were able to do with $279,000 was to build a 96-strand fiber optic network, localized network, to connect all our key institutions, daycare, school, college, band office, a few other locations, and just kind of turned it on. And so now, we're in 2017. That infrastructure is still there. Still, the wireless is still there, 54 megs, and it's still operating. And we share our high-speed internet with all of our institutions on the reserve. But we've been trying to, for the past couple of years, trying to get off the community because the bottleneck is still Northwest Tel. And we are 14 kilometers away from Northwest Tel's fiber optic line coming into bypassing the community. So we asked the federal government for another grant, and this time we built 14 kilometers aerial installation to interconnect with Northwest Tel, and we're still waiting to interconnect. Because of high pricing. According to the CRTC, Northwest Tel needs to work hand in hand with the community, but we're not really getting the cooperation, and they're saying that they are cooperating, but we're not. But now, then the community is looking at, being pressured by Northwest Tel and saying, the incumbent, and saying, you guys should just give us this infrastructure for free, and we will bring you better services because we're such good guys. And so that's when I decided that it was in my community's best interest to look at building a new infrastructure to sidestep Northwest Tel, and that's where we're currently at. And the challenges that that I'm facing. Number one is again, financing. 279 kilometers of 96 strand, low latency fiber, where you don't need to recharge. I got the support of Corning, who came up with a new, the latest fiber technology. Supports us. Annexter, other engineering firms. We're all put together a package to build a new infrastructure. But again, when we pitch it, it's kind of like this pie in the sky, and financiers and investors kind of glaze over, and they're like, "Well, how can you make money on something like that?" And when I say community-based broadband networks, they're like, "Well, that kind of sounds like a socialist idea," And I'm like, "It's not." When you look at a community broadband network, what you're doing is that when you're leasing, when the First Nation builds its infrastructure and leases its infrastructure, it opens up the infrastructure to other providers, and hence we get competition, healthy competition. And then therefore, the investors, not the investors, I mean, but people who come to our networks, look at the infrastructure and say, we don't need to invest $7 million. We can just lease that infrastructure and provide a service, and that's what we want to be. We just want to lease highway, provide a service, provide broadband, lease an infrastructure, and those people can contend with the CRTC rules and regulations. And all at the same time, the First Nation can just sit back and kind of collect a check and say, you know, you lease our infrastructure, you provide a service, and so that's, you know, that's where the concept comes from, is from a company called Alberta SuperNet. You know, they've connect all of Alberta on every single key institution in Canada, and pretty much built, you know, a massive community broadband network. But we don't hear about these things, and so, you know, that's the challenge that I have, is just looking at building and extending that network, because the community is being pressured to hand over something that we built, that we educated ourselves, we trained ourselves, we installed ourselves, and all of a sudden, you know, it's kind of like, you know, well, you should just give it to us, when in fact they were going to sell it to us for $3 million. So, you know, I think that's, you know, I have many more things to say, but I'll just, you know, leave that for now.
Thank you. So we'll come back to questions, you know, a little bit more. I have questions that I'm writing down for you. Right now, can Sally hear us? Can we hear Sally? Sally Braun is the general manager for Western James Bay Telecom. And she is hopefully on the phone. And she has seen a lot of challenges with IT capacity, saying that a lot of IT people are undervalued, and that you know, that they need to be more valued in bringing in you know, the talent and the capacity building. And she also is talking about financing, and we have similar problems of how to secure financing in the United States. But Sally's going to speak a little bit about trying to secure financing with her organization and in Canada. In particular, she's, I think, we almost there. Sally, can you hear us?
I can't hear.
Our sound technician is working at it. Sally?
No.
I think we have a lady. Do I have to speak? No?
Nicole, can you hear me?
Oh, Sally, we can hear you now. Thank you, Sally, for joining us.
Oh, hi. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Please introduce your...
25 here. I wish I was there. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the weather update.
Okay.
Hey, Sally, please share with us your story, your telecom, and the challenges that you have particularly identified in bringing connectivity to your area.
Okay, I was listening to the presenter that was on just now, and he was saying something about 279 kilometers of fiber, and I couldn't quite make out if he was actually trying to lay that fiber or what. But Western James Bay Telecom Network, we're located on the west side of James Bay, which is in the Canada's sub-Arctic. So we have a fiber backbone that's about 270 kilometers that runs from Moosonee, Ontario, up to Attawapiskat. We have about 71 fiber connections, and that's spread over about 33 fiber clients. So we look after the schools and the band offices, and we just it's a challenging environment to be operating an infrastructure in. We have our own. We're a not-for-profit. We have our own separate board of directors from each of the First Nations that we serve. One of our clients is a company that offers wireless internet, and they look after about 500 residential clients. We have a problem with the residential clients. They're saying that the service is too slow and that the internet is very slow and costly. So we are trying to secure financing right now. We're trying to bridge the gap and offer a fiber to the home solution, where the project is going to be about $4.3 million, and we feel the fiber to the home solution is better than the wireless in many ways. In terms of it's better weather-wise, we get pretty severe weather conditions up here. Satellite doesn't work so well, and neither does wireless. We have high winds, blizzards, very low temperatures. So we're going to be offering packages when we get hopefully we'll get the funding for fiber to the home, and our basic packages will be $50, $72, and $89 a month, with varying amounts of gigabytes in each package. We're planning on the second year to offer bundled services of VoIP, voice over internet, phone, TV, and home alarm. So we see this as a way of earning. It's a way of earning revenue, but it's also a way of lowering the cost of living in our region. People will pay less for their internet, and we also see this as a way of starting economic development in these three communities. If we feel that by offering a stable, reliable internet platform in these communities that's comparable to what they have in the South, that the Indigenous population, especially the youth, can really take off, and this entrepreneurial spirit that they have will basically be unleashed. The challenges that we've run into is what the gentleman prior to me was talking about, and that is the financing. In Canada, the banks that we have don't accept assets located on a reserve as collateral, which means that we have to offer collateral in the form of our accounts receivable. They don't seem to look at the merit of the company, the financial stability of the company when assessing the loan risk. The other challenge I see is that the documents that we have to complete in order to get bank loans or get funding are very complex, and I feel unnecessarily complex. Another challenge I see is the local IT techs in the communities seem to be undervalued, especially in our communities. The techs aren't treated well at all. Sometimes they're not paid. They'll come and they'll work on a job, and the people will just saying, oh, well, you didn't get here fast enough, so I'm not going to pay you. So it really is a thankless task because everybody wants their internet fixed and they want it fixed now, but they don't really, nobody really wants to learn how to fix it themselves. Another challenge I see is we did an audit of all the college courses that were offered, and we noticed almost a complete absence of any courses related into teaching people how to fix the internet or how to construct a fiber backbone. And this was compared to a wide variety of courses that taught people how to use the internet to earn a living. So it's like, you know, you've got a horse and, you know, somebody saddles it for you and looks after it and feeds it, and all you've got to do is get up and ride it. And that's kind of the attitude that a lot of consumers in our region have. Is they don't want to be bothered looking after their internet or learning anything about it, but they want us to fix it. So that's fine. There's people that like to fix the internet, and there's people that will come to your house and do that. But I think that I'd like to see the IT techs treated with a little more respect. Another challenge that we have is one that I ran into last week, and why I'm not down there to work with you, and that is that a backhoe went through a buried fiber line up and out of Wapiskat. Somebody didn't look at the drawings, and they went through the 6-inch diameter conduit that was carrying the phone and the fiber lines into the school. So in Canada, if a school has no means of communication with the outside world, no phone service, no VoIP service, it basically shuts down. So the school with 600 students was shut down for a number of days. So we were finally able to get it up and going last Saturday night. The other thing too is, so it's important that people in your community that are in the other trades, they understand your infrastructure, and they understand where it is, and they understand why it's important that, you know, they don't break it. A lot of people in our communities, they don't understand what the internet provides. They don't understand that if the internet breaks down, that there's no 911 service, there's no cell phone service, there's no cable TV because that's on the fiber. There's no telemedicine. There's no uploading of prescriptions. They can't shop for groceries at their local store. They can't do any banking. Everything shuts down. So it's important to get the community on board if you're going to be installing the fiber, a community-based network, that they understand that it needs to be looked after. And the other thing, and then I'll close, is Western James Bay Telecom is an ISP. And as an ISP, we have a responsibility to educate people on how to use the internet. We have to be aware out of the corner of our eye that there's things that the internet is used for that is good and what is bad. So we work very closely with the police and other groups, stakeholders about, and so we're interested in educating the public about identity theft, cyberbullying, assisting, making someone who has a mental health problem not feel worse because of how the internet's being used against them. So we do this in a very, we don't dive into issues like this, but we are aware that of what is going on. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you very much. So we'll come back and we'll talk to some of the issues that you brought up. Next, I'd like to call upon Godfrey Enjady. He's with Mescalero Apache. And Godfrey, tell us about Mescalero Apache. Some of the things that were touched upon by the previous people were about financing. You maybe can share with us about the line of credit, letter of credit issue that we have with going after capital funding. And also, Godfrey, in terms of sustainability, could you share with us the experience or talk to us about Lifeline a little bit and how that is an important function of sustainability for tribal telecoms?
Thank you, Brian. Yes, I will. Actually, I like to walk around because it's pretty warm up here. I feel like I'm about to fall asleep up here. But, I like to walk around and talk to people. But, if you look at what's up here, we've got a policy guy here. This guy was at the FCC. And Geoffrey, through the years that I've known Geoffrey, for the lower 48 and for the Americas, this was our guy. This is the guy that helped us out with everything that we did. And since he's left, it's kind of pretty tough. I tell you, I've been to the FCC, been banging my head. Matt is part of our broadband task force, and that's another thing that's in jeopardy right now. We have no meetings. We have no nothing. The FCC doesn't really recognize Indian country. So, again, in talking about building our telephone company for the Mescalero Apache tribe, little background, I don't know if we got a bio of all of us that we gave to everybody. I don't know if we did or not.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. But anyway, I come from the industry. I used to work for a company called Contel. I started there back in the 70s when I was in high school. Went and worked there cleaning payphones or whatever else. Went to college, came back, and went to work for them again. Still cleaning payphones. If you know what that was an early cell phone because when you left the house, that's where you had to go to find one of these things to make a call. And it was actually pretty good for the guys that went to the casinos or wherever they went. They said, I don't have a cell phone, but now they'll find you, and you can be found anywhere with a cell phone now today because of GPS tracking, whatever else. That guy's not supposed to be where he's supposed to be. But anyway, I worked for a company called Contel, did everything for them. Worked in knock centers, built early fiber networks, worked in what was the early internet back in the early 90s, and I finally left. Actually, I lost my job because GTE bought out our company, which I still stayed there for a little longer. Then I left when it was Verizon. So Verizon had bought us all the way out. When I left, I went back to the tribe. I went to work for them. They asked that I would tribalize a lot of our infrastructure on the reservation. This was back in 1995, which was early for our tribal president, who was Mr. Wendell Chino at the time. So President Chino had me say, hey, we need to tribalize our reservation. We need to make sure that this is in our control to make sure that we go forward and take this by the horns and say this is what we want. So I built a little small gas company for the tribe. I also built a telephone company, which I knew how to do. That's what I used to do. So once I got started, had to go to the FCC to get certificated because I was going to be a regular telephone company to provide the services that we need. Back in the 90s, there was a big digital divide. There was no telephones anywhere. There's still no telephones. And everybody talks about connectivity for internet. Well, we're still trying to get to talk to people across the Navajo reservation. I know that. Brian's company has done a great job in trying to provide a lot of those services to a lot of individuals there on Navajo. So they've done a great job. Sacred wins. But in this thing, and also on the other hand, I wear another hat called the National Tribal Telephone Association. I'm also the president for the association. We have 9 tribally owned telephone companies that we provide services across the country, and that's it. There's no more. And I doubt if there's going to be any more. And I'll let Geoffrey talk a little bit about that because he is the policy guy. He knows what's happening there at the FCC, which I am there too all the time. But in building these phone companies, we provided services. We moved so fast, so far pretty quick that the tribe was still trying to catch up to us. So one of the big things that I've seen an emphasis that should be taken to the tribes at the level at where they're at is education. What's internet for? What do they need it? What do we use it for? Especially the elderly. Elderly have no clue exactly what's going on, except for Brian's mom, who's on Facebook. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I mean, maybe that's a primer to get people to really get into that. But like I said, there's got to be some awareness made about that. Also, as we keep moving forward, I built this company called Mescal Apache Telecom. I'm trying to go as fast as I can. Built it in 2001. It's when we opened our doors. We've been in business since that time. Actually, I started back in 1996. It took a long time to negotiate with GTE, which today would be like Windstream, CenturyLink. Those are tough companies to try to deal with and try to get them to either buy them out. The other bit that you talked about was sustainability. How am I going to pay for this as I keep moving forward? Cable costs money. I mean, people that you hire cost money. Trucks, as they roll to the house to fix phones, they cost money. All of this is not free, and we've got to go out and buy it. I borrow a lot of money from RUS, which is a rural utility service. That's my own banker. You cannot collateralize tribal lands. So how do I get money to come to me from a bank, a conventional bank? That's some of the toughest things to do. But RUS has been a great partner of ours. We've been able to borrow funding from them. It's got a lot of entanglements. They watch your back. They watch everything that you spend. But, I mean, you got to, I guess, jump through the hoops to do what you need to do to provide it. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is provide services for our tribal people. And I took that on by myself. So it's been a challenge trying to help Indian country try to understand exactly what is needed here. But we've got enough people in this room with so much mind power. I couldn't believe some of the things that were being talked about. I mean, this is pretty high-level stuff that we're talking about just the effects of what the social, economic impact to Indian tribes is. I mean, who understands this stuff sometimes? It's kind of crazy. But like with Matt, you know, Matt's a guy. He's a guy that just said, I'm going to do something. We'll worry about what happens when we get there, but we're going to do it. It's that driving power that people have that we need to have in the country today, indigenous communities, especially the people from Alaska and First Nations, Canadians. They said, I'm going to go do something. We've got a problem. We've got to solve it, and we're going to move forward. A lot of that ambition is gone today. I don't see it too much like it used to be. To say, we've got a common goal, let's solve this problem. How do we do that? All the technology, all of that, that's easy stuff. Sustainability, funding, that's tough. Those two go hand in hand, because if you have funding, you can get all the grant money you can, but if you can't sustain it, somebody's going to buy that company away from you for cents on the dollar, and you lost it. I tell you, it's tough. So those two have to go hand in hand. Policy, hopefully Geoffrey will talk a little bit more about that. How do we solve these problems? Where do we go? What do we do? Who has all the money to be able to give us to sustain this networks that we built? And as we keep going forward, the tribe wins at the very end because they have a network. They're able to get to wherever they need to go, talk to whoever they want to, and keep moving forward. And as some of the other programs, we're talking about Lifeline. Those are under attack today. Lifeline and Link Up is a program that actually Jeff was instrumental in keeping it solvent for a long time. Since he's been gone, it's been under attack, and a lot of people want to get rid of it. Get into a policy at the FCC to find out what's going on there. You've got to get online to say, hey, we need to save these programs, because a lot of these are going to go away here pretty soon. In a country, like I said, tribal engagement's not happening from the FCC. It should be happening. They should be asking us, what do we need for our reservations, but they don't. So I'm asking you guys to wake up and become part of the solution to help us form policy for any country, because it's there. They just forgot where it was, and it's been there. So anything else that you want to say?
Yeah, well, let me, there's a couple things that you mentioned. RUS, what is RUS?
The Rural Utility Service, it's part of the Department of Agriculture in the lower 48 for us. They are tremendous. Keith Adams was one of the guys. He was the administrator for the telecommunications side, but they have a new guy that was just there that they assigned today. I forget his name. There's a new guy at RUS for telecom.
Not Brian anymore.
No. No.
Oh, a lot of people
But
named
Keith
Brian.
Adams left. Or they, he got reassigned, let's just say that. So, but other than that, there's a new guy there at RUS. They're the guys that help you out no matter what. I mean, I tell you, get a hold of your GFR, which is the general field rep. He's the one that can help you down that road of saying, hey, I need some money. You can get it on the internet program. You can get it underneath telecom. There's also some small loans to start up your new company if you want to. I'll let Geoffrey talk a little bit more about the policy on the other side. Went to the FCC because he knows a lot better. Plus, he's a lawyer. He's pretty good at that.
So one more thing before you go. Explain how Lifeline helps your sustainability.
Oh.
What is Lifeline?
Lifeline is another program that is very instrumental in my company and a lot of the tribally owned telephone companies. What it is something that Jeff probably can attest to a little bit better than I can, but it's a program that was set out for a lot of the what's the best word for that? People that needed help the most, let's just say that. What it does is provide $34.50, I think is it, a month for their regular phone service. Plus lately it's been able to do broadband. So if you're part of a program like SNAP, or it used to be a school lunch program was one of them, but they took that away.
SNAP is food stamps, right?
Yeah, food stamps. What else? BIA assistance, some of the other, there's quite a few. TANF is another one, yes. But if you qualify for some of that, you're able to get this program where it helps pay for your phone bill and part of your broadband. It's $34.50 plus. There's also a link up, which will help pay for up to $75, I think it was, to hook your line up, place the line in the ground, and it helped pay for that. And moving forward, it helped pay you. But there's some criteria that you have to meet. One is the provider has to be an ETC, certificated by the state, or if you can go to the FCC, they might be able to certificate you, which they've been doing. And you're able to get that subsidy for each of the customers that you have. In Mescalero, I have 1,200 access lines. Of those 1,200 access lines, I have 600 on that, on Lifeline. So it's a good chunk of our membership that qualify underneath that. So it makes up a big part of my funding for services. So I'm sure you guys have that too, right, at Sacred Wind?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Lifeline's a big program for us.
Okay, but I'll let Geoffrey talk a little
I'm
bit more
gonna pick
about
on
that.
Geoffrey
Maybe
here
if
real
we-
quick.
If we can get him to help us on that. Anything else?
No.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
So next we have Geoffrey Blackwell. He used to be a chief at the FCC. But Jeff, there were some things that explained, and you, with your background, one of the barriers that I've identified and would like to speak to, what was just spoken of, is ETC, right? Let's explain what ETC is, and then also the process in which the application process in general, and what are the benefits of becoming an ETC. Jeff?
Can you hear me? Is this working? So thanks, Brian. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for mentioning my name about 9 times, Godfrey. My name is Geoffrey Blackwell. I'm an enrolled member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I'm descended from the Chickasaw Nation, Choctaw Nation, and Omaha tribe of Nebraska, which is pronounced nasally, way up in your nose, Omaha. Somebody was speaking earlier about the loss of artifacts and going and finding things at the National Museum of the American Indian. There was a sacred pole with the Omahas that was found in that, was identified. There have been a few presentations today that really hit home with me. I guess I want to start by thanking ISOC. I started hearing about a meeting in New Mexico and Santa Fe about indigenous connectivity. I heard about it from various corners of Indian country, and people asking, do you know who's going? Are you going to go? What's going on up there? And I said, yeah, I'm going to go. I love this stuff. I'll do whatever. I want to make a point, though, about where we are in the growth and the development of native connectivity in the United States. And I recently was witness to a speech made by the head of a telecommunications regulatory federal body, and it struck me. It really hit me, and I want to read to you something that was said and see if it resonates with you as well. So bear with me for just a second. I want to be accurate in my quote. The speaker said, in today's world, internet has become a basic right along with other human rights, such as the right to have access to water, air, and good life. Now, if you were to guess, who would you say made that statement? I can tell you, it was His Excellency Hamad Obeid Al-Mansouri, who was the Director General of the Telecommunications Regulatory Authority for the United Arab Emirates. And I have never, I had the great honor and privilege of working with, I think, 7 chairs of the Federal Communications Commission, and with the possible exception of Commissioner Copps, who was an acting chairman for far too short an amount of time, I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about the internet as a basic human right. And that really hit home with me. So I'll tell you, I'm a huge fan of community-based networks. I mean, I've worked with all sorts of different types of networks. And by whatever the definition is, community-based networks are really where we end up in many places in Indian country. And the subject of this panel is financing, right? I mean, we're talking about different types of financing, and I'll get to the ETC answer. But I can tell you over the last 20 years, the federal government, between the Rural Utility Service and the Federal Communications Commission, have tried a number of different proposed solutions to closing what was called 22 years ago this digital divide. And my opinion is, if you think about that digital divide as a disease, what's been tried is several solutions, several band-aids, and several, Lifeline is one of those solutions. And they've worked where they've worked, and what has been created is a more recalcitrant strain of this divide, this lack of connectivity. So there was another speaker that talked about, I think, being rebellious and being creative. And we're really going to have to get creative to get connectivity where it is not in this industrialized nation and in this entire hemisphere. If you are looking at financing for community programs, you really have to vest your time in some strategic planning, in some community planning, and with an eye towards really sharpening your pencil. And the reason why I say that isn't just because there's less money lying around. There are a lot of loans available, but there's far fewer in programs now in our federal government that are just grants. Compared to a decade ago, we're in a vastly different place. I mean, I was involved in government long enough to remember when we had a surplus. I mean, that goes way back. I was like 12 years old, okay? But we've gone from $1 trillion surplus to $1 trillion deficit, and the federal government is sharpening its pencil, so you should as well. But the other reason why I say that is this is expensive stuff. You don't want to cover the same ground twice. So if you're looking at something like a point-to-point microwave solution, take your time. A similar speaker in the same conference said, we want to go slow to get it right. And I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that. I can remember when the Stimulus Act was being written, and there were so many trains leaving so many stations. The big call was to find a shovel-ready. Well, there aren't that many shovel-ready projects left in Indian country. These are complex issues that have been discussed. I mean, and some of them are the same issues been discussing for a long time: population density, terrain, sacred lands, public safety. I mean, These have been issues for a long time. Some of them have been solved in certain places. Some of them remain. And in a vastly different and changing political environment, one really has to do one's homework. So the point being, time spent like this, time spent planning, time spent thinking about the policy implications and what that means in terms of the ability to get capital, that's a very important time spent. So don't rush. Take your time, get it right at this point. So to understand the federal side of things, there are federal agencies in the United States that have programmatic dollars. There's a distance learning program at the Rural Utility Service. There's a Community Connect program at the Rural Utility Service. There are loans if you're going to become or aspire to become a truly regulated telco entity. Now, the Federal Communications Commission is not part of the executive branch. It doesn't do loans or grants. What it does, well, the FCC really does sort of three things. The first thing it does is it licenses. I know there's been discussion of radio here. There's discussion of wireless services. I'd like to make a statement or two about that. So it licenses, it subsidizes. The commission has over $9.5 billion a year in subsidy for connectivity. And then it's just sort of a higher order regulator. It's got a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of policy and paperwork. I used to work with folks in different federal agencies. They'd be really proud if they wrote 2 or 3 rulemakings a year, and the commission does hundreds and hundreds of rulemakings a year. And the reason why is the commission sits on a lot of money. It's got a lot of money for this stuff. So the Universal Service Fund is the catch-all phrase, the sort of top-line description of the FCC's subsidy mechanisms. And they're really for 4 basic purposes. The first is corporate, like corporate subsidy. It's called either high cost or the Connect America Fund more recently in its most recent reincarnation. And then there are programs that support basic elements of society. And Congress has said the FCC can spend money on these priorities. Education, healthcare, and low-income communities. And Lifeline is the low-income program. Lifeline and LinkUp are the low-income program. So if you want to understand the possibilities of receiving federal funding, one needs to spend a little bit of time looking into what the puts and the takes of those programs. They've changed vastly over the last 20 years, and some of them, like I said, your pencil gets sharpened. Now, the acronym Eligible Telecommunications Carrier, eligible for what? Eligible to receive federal funding, FCC funding, and there are 2 programs in particular that you need to have that ETC designation to access. The high cost program, the federal subsidy program, the corporate subsidy program, and it's for operational and capital expenditures. And then the other has always been Lifeline, and that has been a regulatory question lately, a policy question. There have been a number of policy questions that have been up in the air for a little while about Lifeline. It's been a program that's had a lot of controversy in it. The other thing that I would say that you need to understand about this Universal Service Fund is that there was a period of time when there was a lot of money in the industry, there was a lot of money in Washington, there was a lot of money flowing, and a natural derivative, there was a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in this program. One of the things you see, that I guess one of the things I can say, I am, once again, a former recovering Fed, so I can be a little honest at times. The FCC never lets folks see it sweat. It works very, very hard in these rulemakings, and it knows a great deal about these companies that it subsidizes. I mean, I used to take a look at this gentleman's financials on a quarterly basis. We knew where all the pennies were. We had to. We were supposed to. And especially when my office, the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, the office that I helped the commission found, and I worked as its founding chief for almost 6 years, especially when we were developing policy proposals. We had to base them on the reality of the marketplace in Indian country. So we really needed to look at what was going on Mescalero and Hopi and Cheyenne River, Gila River. And these are very different economies, even within and among Indian country. And to try to come up with good policy proposals necessitated a deep level of knowledge in what's going on in the industry. And once you get deep, you really see what's going on in certain places in waste, fraud, and abuse. So a lot of the policy making of the last decade has been driven by that concern, the concern of waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's some of the controversy behind some of the Connect America Fund reforms, some of the Lifeline reforms. Now, that's not all of it. One of the major priorities of the FCC was to take these programs that were created for basic telephone service and transition them into programs that supported broadband services. And that's a big deal and a lot of countries have been facing this sort of regulatory reform challenge. For us in the US, it came as a result of an economic collapse that almost brought down the House. I will say, I think also because of a person of color in the White House, and because for the first time, our United States wrote a national broadband plan. Now that national broadband plan had one fundamental challenge. The money got spent in the Stimulus Act before the plan got written. So it was really kind of a fire, ready, aim type of atmosphere. But it also gave us data points that we learned a lot about. So with the help of several folks in this room, and some folks I've known for 20 years, some 30, Norbert and I went to college together. Wicked smart dude sitting in the back of the room. With the help of a lot of people, we started surfacing a number of policy proposals, and it was my job to help the FCC push the restart button on a comprehensive regulatory plan to address the digital divide in Indian country. And I can tell you, we really left no stone unturned. I was sort of hired to be the burr under the saddle, and we definitely did. We proposed things that pushed the limits. We know now we've got a very good idea of how the federal government will spend and what it won't to deploy in certain areas. We have experience in where certain proposals will achieve solutions and where there's just going to need to be other potential solutions. And then there's also some fundamental challenges, I think, that native lands, indigenous lands throughout the hemisphere face. One of them is the regulatory priority of competition. The first major piece of legislation in the United States having to do with telecommunications regulation is the Communications Act of 1934. The first time that act was substantially overhauled and rewritten, it was in 1996. Now, if anybody, the Telecommunications Act of 96, if anybody can remember the political landscape in 96, it was very different. It was a very different political landscape. And who knew the word broadband in 1996? Anybody in here? No? No, come on, you did not, really. Okay, maybe Ross, maybe, okay. Maybe you, sir, I'm not gonna dispute it. But the rest of us, we didn't know. And so one of the hallmarks of the Telecommunications Act is this free market competitive theory idea that the United States has, that if we open up the markets to competition, competition is going to drive deployment and it's going to push price down. Has that worked on tribal lands? It has in certain tribal lands, but it has not in many others. And part of it is because the very thing that Godfrey said, we don't hold title in many places. And even like Acoma, that does hold title to their land, it's still trust restricted. They still can't encumber it in a way that if you and I wanted to start a small business, we might be able to do with our personal mortgages. So getting financing, this is something that's important to understand about the financing landscape in Indian country, is that there are some fundamental tenets of the regulatory field that sometimes operate potentially against the way that the economics in Indian country work. And competition may be one of them. I submit that perhaps it is time to start looking at who the best company or community or deployment organization is to fund. Now the reality is, okay, so I used to live right outside of Washington, D.C., in Rockville, Maryland. A lot of Indians in the U.S. know Rockville because that's where the Indian Health Service is. And one day I'm out mowing my lawn. Literally, I'm out mowing my lawn, and these guys walk up and they start pushing something into the ground in my front yard. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, we're putting fiber in. And I said, whoa, 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 can I ride along with you guys for half a day? Well, Verizon was deploying Fios fiber in our neighborhood just 'cause they knew someday somebody was going to buy some of that. Now I live now, so I grew up in Albuquerque. We moved home a couple years ago. Albuquerque, there's no fiber in Albuquerque. There's fiber in certain places, but there's no fiber to the home there. So when it comes to the questions of population density and competition, you really got to figure out where you fit in this political and this regulatory landscape as to what you want to do. Now, you didn't hear this here, but there are a lot of people who are discussing whether or not Washington is going to continue to be a solution, because we're getting down to the point where it's getting truly challenging for certain financing. Now, this idea of there are other places where we can go and look. Are we going to have to sharpen our pencils and become more utilitarian? Do we aggregate demand? Do we plan in such a way that we increase the number of people in this room by 5-fold? Because we need to sit down and talk with the law enforcement folks. We need more educators here. We need more healthcare officials here. We need more government officials here. We all start talking about how we pool all of our resources to truly be able to afford the Valhalla fiber and wireless, because that's where it's trending right now. So these are not new ideas. This has been around for a long time. This idea of how do you actually find money when pretty much their investments are already made, and a lot of the bigs, they've made their money. They don't want to go out and deploy unless it's $3 million for something. If you had $3 million, you would have done it yourself. I mean, so that's big picture. Let me step back. And let me tell you about my day job. I work for an organization called AMERIND Risk Management Corporation. We're essentially an insurance company, but a particular hybrid type. It's a governmental entity risk pool. It's a private insurance company that's owned by about 400 tribes. And essentially it's a financial management company. And we insure all sorts of types of critical infrastructures in Indian country. You may know them as houses and buildings and hotels. We happen to insure a number of different types of infrastructures, the kind of which this gentleman has built. And a couple of years ago, I joined AMERIND as General Counsel and Chief Strategy Officer. And one of the things I proposed to our board, and the board loves it, and the company's doing really well, is a new division called AMERIND Critical Infrastructure. There's a lot of people who like to use the catchphrase, let's think outside the box. But they really don't. They come back around to the same, well, let's go to the Fed, and let's see if we can find an angel investor, and maybe we can. So our concept in AMERIND Critical Infrastructure is that most tribes are not going to be able to have somebody on full-time to be able to handle the heavy lifting to access the big bucks that are over at the FCC and some of these programs. Because all due respect to our friends at the Rural Utility Service, the Community Connect program is a single application, and it can be a good amount of money, a one-time fund. I'm hoping that they'll get up to the millions again, but we're not there yet. But something like the E-rate program at the FCC and the Universal Service Administrative Company, that's a gauntlet of like 7 applications. It's an own internal RFP process. So at AMERIND, we can have the folks on staff. We have other profit centers that can support them. Their goal is not to bring in big profit. I mean, they've got to pay for the lights and and keep the electricity going. But their goal is to get big money into Indian country, to bring millions into our clients, so that our clients can build more infrastructure, so that we can turn around and help protect that infrastructure through risk management dollars thereby fulfilling the thing that we've always talked about in Indian country, how to make dollars circulate in Indian country to help our own communities. Now, it doesn't happen in a day. None of this happens in a day, but it's a start. Right now, they're helping, I think, seven tribes, about 9 million in funding, more or less, a little less, 8 million, 8.5. And they've had their doors open for about a year now, about a year and about 5 quarters. So you do have to think creatively about funding. I would also say to have a good handle on what you're actually going to create. There's a lot of folks right now who talk, we're talking last mile, we're talking middle mile, and maybe they know what they're talking about. I will say I've learned a lot. I do come from the regulatory side. I didn't grow up in the infrastructure side. I've spent 20 years in it, so I feel pretty comfortable in what I know. But you really need to get in touch with some folks who really understand hard engineering as well. Because most people don't understand that 4G LTE on this device, it means you have to have enough power and enough fiber to a tower to carry the big data. Now, the big challenge of rural telcos these days is they're being forced to move in directions where their consumers want to go. They want. I mean, when these first came out, everybody was thinking, oh, that's going to be such a luxury. And when the little clam phone came out, everybody thought, oh, wow, that's showy. Nobody ever was going to, and I think everybody knows this, I think I'm telling everybody, nobody ever thought they were going to give up their home phone. Nobody ever thought they'd be able to take a 202 area code and move it to the 505. Now, how many people have five of these devices? I mean, at least 2. Yeah, at least 2, at least 3. And then you probably got 2 or 3 sitting around. Check your bill. I just found out that we had, like, where is this device? I can't believe we're paying $20 a month for this. So, so community-based financing, it is, one of the things that AMERIND did recently also is that we convinced our board, who unanimously agreed that we would take a portion of what we typically just keep in T-bills. I mean, it's insurance, okay, so it has to be low risk. We can't bet the farm with our assets, and we have to maintain reserves. But rather than sit in vehicles that really don't return much, we decided that we would put together a community impact or a social impact investment policy. And we recently partnered with OISTA, the First Nations Development Fund, to seed CDFIs throughout Indian country for a variety of purposes. And I hope that we can identify some that are broadband-based. That's part of our bread and butter. We will certainly do things that are community health and housing-based as well. But when it comes to being an eligible telecommunications carrier, to answer your question, so the first proof is that you can provide everything that's supported. I mean, it's more than just voice-grade access to the publicly switched telephone network. It's that you're more than just a simplistic or straightforward IT department, that you truly do, you can provide that high-quality regulated services. And then there's a variety of new showings that you have to make, including build-out plans and service models. I mean, the big challenge for many folks is standing up a business that can simply, have an accounts receivable and an HR department and run a business. But then also, the commission, these are hard to come by. These are very hard to come by in this financial environment. In the 12 or so years during two terms that I worked, 2 periods that I worked at the FCC, I was asked earlier today, there was a young lady who asked me how many wireless ETC designations in Indian country there are. And by Indian country, I think she meant tribally owned and operated. And I could only think of 2. Standing Rock Telecom, which is now called Rock Telecom, and the Navajo Nation Tribal Utility Authority Wireless, which is an ETC only for Lifeline. And then beyond that, only a couple more. There was a Western Wireless designation, but that wasn't in 2001, but that wasn't tribal. and then Hopi Telecom. I do not know, given the question that Godfrey asked about the future of new potential tribally owned telcos. I am ever hopeful that there will be companies that will realize that they've kind of had their run, they've had their 70, 80-year run, and with the new expectations around funding from the commission, there are some carriers that don't want to take on the new obligations. So I'm hoping that they'll be able to open up opportunities for acquisitions by tribes. But so far, that's kind of stuck in second gear, if I'm honest. It's not working well. So if I may, the last point that I'd like to make is one that I heard was discussed yesterday, and it has to do with wireless services and spectrum or frequency. And I am a huge advocate. I've been sounding like a broken record for years about our need for licensing for tribal lands. And there was a point in time where the commission voted 5-0 to create new licensing mechanisms for tribal lands. And the commission has not taken action on that. And I hope that Chairman Pai and this commission will. I think that there are portions of that rulemaking that are easily implementable. But the essential idea is that for new licenses, that tribes be approached with the opportunity for carve-out that would match their service areas, that would match their lands. Now, there are some complexities that the commission would need to work out there. There was also a proposal that for spectrum that has just simply been warehoused, that's just being sat on in many places, that tribal nations would have the opportunity to trigger a secondary markets negotiation for fair market value. So that's kind of complex stuff. It's kind of heady, but don't lose sight of the fact that these licenses can also be, the reason why I mention that is that these become assets and they become bankable assets. Getting a license from the FCC is no joke when you go to talk to a bank or a financier. They're rare and they're very valuable. So once again, I'm really just honored to be here. I think I should probably tell you this hotel especially. In the 1930s, my Choctaw great-grandfather and my Chickasaw great-grandmother lived and taught in the village at Picarise. And there are many families there that are still very close friends. And when I was a boy, we used to go up to feasts, and I ran in the races, if you can imagine it, tried to climb the pole. For those of you who have ever seen it, I encourage you to go up to the Feast of San Lorenzo. But they're, of course, the owner of this facility. So it's nice to be, I don't know if there's anybody who's actually here from Picarise, but it's nice to be in their midst. So thank you, Mado.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you very much. Let me ask a question to the panel, something that in terms of land use, maybe so we could talk about a little bit about. Let me ask the panel, what is your experience with right-of-ways and land use policies? Let me ask Lyle first.
I guess in the Northwest Territories, we have right-of-ways that are already designated by the Northwest Territories. So they're, highway right-of-ways, and they are, again, fall in our traditional territory, which is 100 square kilometers, 100 square miles. And right now, the community is negotiating, these land claim agreements with the federal government of Canada, and there's two types. There's the comprehensive claim, which is again a model, that has been forced down throats of Indigenous groups in Northwest Territories, and the other one is kind of like the specific claims. Specific claims deals with outstanding issues of when we signed, the adhesion treaties, friendship treaties with the Confederation of Canada. And so one of the things that, with the adhesion treaties, we're Treaty 8 territory. And under that, we've been able to solidify a lot of, since Ree Paulette in 1980, Francois Paulette took the federal government to court in regards to the interpretation of a treaty, meaning that we have two versions. One, we have the federal government version, which is the written version of the treaty, and we have the non-verbal, we have the verbal agreement of what we signed. So there's two versions of this complexity. We believe that we are signing friendship treaties, and the federal government says, no, this is what you signed. Ree Paulette case, Francois Paulette, when he was at the age of 19, took the federal government of Canada to court and cast doubt on the written version of the treaty, meaning that this is not defined. And so therefore, the federal government of Canada, through the highest court in the land, Supreme Court, said, you guys need to go back and define what that treaty is. And so then therefore, this comprehensive claim model was born out of it. So that's where we're at. We're always looking at comprehensive claims, specific claims in regards to land access, land use. One of the issues that I've seen, that has happened, and it's still on the books, and we kind of let the CRTC know in Ottawa that when the incumbent, put a fiber optic line right along the reserve, straight through our corridor, on our traditional land, we weren't informed. There was no consent. There was no, there was no engagement in regards to this happening. All I remember was, I was driving off the reserve and going into town, and there was this guy on this little trencher, putting the cable in the ground. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is traditional KFN land. I don't know, I'm just doing my job. And he just kept on going, right? And so that's where we're at, right? And so we went to the CRTC and said, this has happened. Under the Canadian Constitution, the Indigenous people or the First Nation people are entrenched in the Canadian Constitution. We are part of the Constitution, meaning that we have Aboriginal rights, we have treaty rights, we are citizens plus, is what some academia have said. And we're saying, when I walked into the CRTC office and said, when this fiber came through our traditional land, you, the CRTC, are part of the Constitution. We have 3 tiers, of that derive from the Constitution, and you guys have, you have to protect Canadians. On top of that, you have to protect Indigenous rights, and you guys failed miserably when the incumbent came through and put in an application and said, we're going to bring fiber to the Northwest Territories because we're lovely corporate citizens, and it's a great deal. We're going to increase the livelihood of all the NWT residents, and yet we're 300 people on the reserve, don't see a benefit. So we've put this whole process in hiatus because we just wanted to tell the CRTC that when this happened, you guys failed to protect us. And so therefore, you're on notice. And when I said that, the CRTC commissioner and some of them kind of sat up and said, as they're taking notes, one guy looked up and looked at me and said, should I be bringing a lawyer in here right now? And I'm like, no, this is just a candor conversation from my community to yours, and that this has happened, and you failed. And but we won't forget, and we may come back to deal with this later. So right now, you know, we've are settled in our regions various treaties, the comprehensive claim model treaties. One of the biggest issues we're having right now is, again, trying to define and implement those land claims that have happened. And I myself have been working with my community in the land claims and comprehensive and specific claims. And with that knowledge, I was able to utilize that knowledge to help further our telecommunications goals. And I'm hoping that, you know, in the near future, that, you know, when we do settle our comprehensive claim and specific claim models, we are looking to increase our land mass, our land size, and we are looking at wanting to look at, you know, as a, you know, fiber optic as the next broadband utility for the First Nations. And it's very complex. And, you know, and the CRTC knows that, you know, we're there and that we've mentioned this. And we're hoping that, you know, at some point that, you know, the issue will be brought to the table. But right now we're working on implementation of a specific claims called, it's funny, it's called the cows and plows clause, where the federal government promised us certain number of cows and plows and, you know, and they're supposed to give it to us, right, since we signed the treaties. And now in modern day sense, we've been negotiating agricultural benefits, and we've successfully negotiated, you know, a huge settlement just because they didn't give us our cows and our plows. Where in the north, where we have, like, you know, short seasons, and we're not farmers, right? We're hunters, we're trappers, we're gatherers, you know, we've always been that way. But and then, you know, the federal government is just like, but you guys are not farmers. Hey, we didn't write the agreement. That's right. But yeah, no, there's a lot of issues in the north. A lot of issues in you know, there's adhesion treaties right across Canada, and a lot of challenges. You know, and a lot of First Nations are seeing broadband ownership as the potential economic driver, where, you know, we no longer, you know, should be behind industry. We should be leading industry. You know, you know, people say, you know, some people, you guys are still here. Who are you talking to? You know, we've been here for generations, and, you know, we've been thriving, and we're still thriving. You know, Dene people have always been innovators, and other tribes throughout the North America have been innovators in order for them to be successful in these environments that have been given to us. And so we're going to adapt, and we're going to keep on adapting.
Thank you. Godfrey, same question to you. Laying down your fiber optics and putting up your infrastructure, are there barriers in land use that you find on your own reservation?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I just received a RUS loan for $5.5 million to install fiber to the home in Mescalero right now. 900 of our homes will be connected. Actually, we're finishing it up. We're in the last phases of our construction, all the fibers to the house right now. We're just installing all of the equipment at the house now. So we've got fiber to 900 homes in Mescalero. So it's a robust system. It's a 2.4 gigabyte system to every home on the reservation. And that's pretty big. So it's an AdTran system. So if any guys want to come down to look at it, just come on down. I mean, we're down in Mescalero. Yeah. Come on down and take a look at it. It's got a 40 gigabyte backbone. So I've built it pretty robust. So it's something that I'm always kind of looking forward to the future and making sure. Hopefully it's kind of future-proof, but it's not. I mean, it's going so fast. I tell you, but it's been challenging. The things for right of ways is tribes usually don't have them. I mean, said, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go down this field and hopefully I don't hit any water lines. I've hit $500,000 worth of water lines in the tribe. I sent the tribe home twice this year for hitting and emptying a 100,000-gallon tank of water line. So no restrooms worked at the tribal offices, so only because they didn't know where their water lines were. This is something that is a problem in any country, and that's why we've always said in any country it costs more to dig in any country than anywhere else because there are no maps for any infrastructure at all, except for telecom. I mean, we have our stuff. BIA, they built their little systems. The tribe goes through USDA or RUS to get another water or sewer line thing. They have their own little thing. Nobody talks together. I mean, I've tried to have meetings trying to get everybody to say, hey, where are the water lines? There are some gas lines. Where are the sewer lines? And nobody knows. And the guy that used to know retired, and he left that, didn't leave the knowledge of that behind. So that's what we're saying. So I'm advocating a lot lately for hopefully some kind of, at least some seed funding for at least infrastructure development when it comes to GPS and GIS mapping. That's something that's needed for tribes. And land recordation, mostly in some tribal nations that have that department, can probably try to do that. But I mean, it's tough in Mescalero where we had it. And like I said, it added probably about $500,000 of just fixing water lines. So we found some sewer lines that were in wooden boxes. That's how they built the water lines, so just 4 sides, and water was running out. Actually worked for all this time until we hit it, and then we had to put all brand new pipeline because, I mean, how do you fix in between water? I mean, yeah, let's put some more boards, I guess. I don't know what to, I don't know. But that didn't work out. But other than that, right-of-ways on any lands is under attack too, especially at the FCC. I was just there a few weeks ago when they're trying to kind of loosen the controls for the historic preservation portion for right-of-ways on Indian lands. That's a big fight that's coming up, and that's something that it's going to loosen it where anybody can say, I'm going to run a new tower here, and I don't need a historic preservation review. And it's a big issue right now. So that's happening right now. The FCC, there's a few people that are heading that up, so you might check that out a little bit if you can. But other than that,
Before we get to Jeff, Sally, are you still with us? Sally, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
To you deployed fiber and wireless. Can you speak to a little bit of issues and right-of-ways in your experience? Has that been a problem?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
In terms of your deployment, and when you deployed your fiber and your wireless network, were there issues with getting access to land and to right-of-ways? Did you experience any issues in that regard when you were doing your deployment?
No. What happened was a diamond mine was discovered about 90 kilometers west of Atawapskat. The diamond mine needed power, so the power was brought in. And at the time, our Grand Chief, Dr. Stan Udit, he said, if you're going to bring power into the mine, I want fiber optic into my communities. So that's how we got the optical ground wire into Fort Albany, Kashechewan, and Atawapskat. It's a 1 gig backbone, and the funding that we're applying for from the federal government is we're hoping to bring it up to 100 gigs. And I just wanted, the other thing too was the gentleman we're talking about hitting getting underground infrastructure. One of the things that we have in Ontario, it's a system called One Call, and it in municipalities you can make one call and it tells you where all the sewer lines are, where all the underground cables are, etc., the gas line. There's no such thing on reserves as One Call. So that's another thing that I'm going to be looking at with my company, with Western James Bay, is going door to door and talking to the contractors and the guys that are running the equipment and showing them where it is, even if it means laminating the drawings and hanging it in their office so they've got no reason. The other thing too is when you bury cable, it's important that 1 foot above the cable, you put a bright orange fluorescent tape. So the heavy equipment operator, he knows when he hits that tape, he knows that there's a cable there. And sometimes that's the case on reserve, sometimes it isn't. So yeah, that's the sort of the bane of my existence is people who hit underground cables. But no, we had no we had no problem. The communities wanted the fiber optic, so we had no issues there.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you very much. Let me ask another question here.
Can I add just a little bit of that, because this is big stuff. There's rarely, I mean, this is a very important question at a very important time. So I'll preface this by saying that I think one of the major problems is that, and maybe this is pervasive, not just in the issues being discussed in this land, in this room, is that there has been a disassociation between politics and policy right now. And we really need to get the policies associated with rights of way, environmental reviews, cultural preservation reviews back into the proper lens of how they should be viewed. They occupy a very important role in societal development. So I was recently involved in a discussion in DC around these things, and I just want to read very quickly from some of the notes that I put together after having talked with a number of tribal leaders about things like rights of way and cultural preservation. So one of the first most important points to make is that tribes should continue to be included in these processes, that and should be continue to be included at a level to maintain control when the tribes are on their own lands or in places where they have deep cultural associations with those lands. I mean, there are a number of tribes that are no longer where they were originally, and that is an ongoing challenge and harm to those communities. And there are certain laws, like the Historic Preservation Act, that is the only law that allows tribes to find where their people are, where their people were. So recognizing a bit of history and a role of tribal governments, of course, and that tribal governments, their motivations are just as broad as any other government. They're just as motivated for deployment as they are preservation. Another point is that this is truly technical stuff when you get down to the granular level. So there is a point in time where you got to kind of get the politicians out of the way and get the technicians working together, especially when it comes to rights of way. Now, just I think as a couple folks have said, decreasing the barriers to easements. I mean, these dig once rules that everyone has talked about but aren't in place. We need to increase opportunities for co-locations. It's very difficult and challenging sometimes to put a spade in the ground or to trench on tribal land. And if the ground is open, let's not let competition be a barrier to co-location. I mean, I talked earlier, kind of went on a rant about competition and the challenges of competition. Well, this is one place where if you have if you're in an area where maybe competition can potentially be viewed, if everybody's digging once, twice, three, that's unsustainable. So there was something that was very interesting that happened as a result of the Stimulus Act in the United States. It put things like environmental reviews, in my opinion, this is my opinion, put things like environmental reviews, rights of way, and cultural preservation at odds with the funding mechanisms. There's actually a very famous case of a situation where a carrier got funded to deploy on 2 reservations in the state of Montana. And because the funding didn't have rights of way involved in it, and because it boiled down to a huge debate within certain federal agencies, and the funding, over $35 million in funding, got returned, never got spent, unrealized opportunity. So we need to step back as policymakers, politicians, and say, look, this is an important and valid role to make sure, because one thing we know in Indian country is that there are places where connectivity is desperately needed, as much as it is in any other segment of society. But there are other places where it absolutely shall not go. It should not go. There are cultural places. There are places that it's inappropriate, and that's a very individual priority from tribe to tribe. When it comes to the Section 106 process and the cultural preservation process, the unfortunate reality is that there are a few bad situations that are driving a view of the entire field as being negative, and that's just simply not the case. And when it comes to the rights-of-way processes, the kernel of the rights-of-way process in the United States, the kernel of that is really an appraisal of the value. And look, tribes are not obstructionist, but sometimes the only thing they have left is an authority associated with the right-of-way. And I think the whole thing needs to be sort of jump-started in a way where there's a prioritization for new technologies and broadband. The previous administration had that on the books and was working on it in the executive branch. And then also finding the true market value of what some of this is, what some of this connectivity in the ground is going to be valued at, so that it can happen more efficiently, and so that it's not viewed necessarily as economic development, but the deployment of a necessary utility that all the other economic development can occur on. So thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. We are 10 minutes to 5. Let's open this up. I had another question, but I want to open up for questions on the floor. We've got questions.
For all of you, or any of you, identify
Please identify yourself and then also speak.
Innovation Park and the Microgrid Systems Laboratory. I'm curious to know if any of you interact with the electricity and energy sector at all within your tribal domains, and if there's any awareness of the interplay or synergies between telecom and energy infrastructure, particularly with regards to the concept of energy sovereignty and what you're trying to achieve in the communications area.
Wow. Godfrey, get toward you.
We do work in our energy sector. I guess it would be the co-op. If you didn't notice, in this state, one tribal entity did take over the co-op because they weren't providing services that were needed. But they were pretty, Dulce took over and they're looking at hopefully maybe building their own telecom beside that, with that. But I'm not sure exactly where they're at right now. But for us, I mean, synergy-wise, I guess our tribal people do belong to the co-op. They sit on the board, so we try to work with them. But the only thing I like to say is that if I could reduce the cost for pole attachments, I mean, I'm paying $20 a month on each pole. I mean, that's pretty high. I mean, it keeps going up. So, but other than that, I mean, that's the only relationship that we have. If you look at tribes right now, you have to see that they have no real master plan in some tribes. Some are more advanced than others, but most of them don't have a reason why they should even talk together. I mean, anytime they can get money, they're running with it and trying to build it out, not thinking about anybody else that say, hey, let's dig once, let me throw some conduit in that, and we'll throw extra stuff. I mean, no one talks about that at the very minute. I mean, when that money hits, you got to start building and you're going to town. Other than that, contractors don't like to mess with anybody else because their scope of work does not include the one dig option. So they're staying to the scope of work, and like I said, anytime you change that, that's more money that they get to pull in. So, I mean, it's kind of a bad thing.
Oh, thank you, Godfrey. Lyle, before we go to you, Sally, did you hear the question? Yes, Sally? Yes? let me go ahead and go to Lyle. Lyle, you have a quick response?
Quick response, yeah. You know, right now, when we were extending the 1 kilometer to 14 kilometers, one of the issues we had was, did we want to trench or did we want to attach to utility poles? But there's a section on our community where there is no utility poles. And it was more quick to attach it to a utility pole than to trench. So then we just approached the local utility company and said, you know, we're going to buy these utility poles and we're going to install them and we're going to attach our fiber on them. Can you guys run a secondary power line to the community? Because right now there's just one power line coming into our First Nation community, and that an opportunity with the funding that we, you know, isn't a whole lot. But then we said, you know, can we spend a little bit of this in order to buy power poles and install the power poles, you know, ourselves, and then reach out to the power company and say, you know what, we have these power poles, you know, can you guys bring more power? And they were like, yeah, we're willing to do that. And so there's always, you know, we look for opportunities with what little we have. And so that's how we were able to work with the local utility company.
Thank you. We have another question from Richard.
Thanks. Just to build on David's question about the possible integration of energy and communications, we haven't really talked here about this new catchphrase, the IoT, the Internet of Things, and also the fact that beyond Internet, everything is data now, and transportation and energy, as well as telecommunications, really have opportunities to be integrated and using same right-of-ways, providing opportunities to save cost by integrating those systems. Our energy systems require two-way communications now, often wireless, but as well as they're putting up fiber because they own their own infrastructure. And I think there's some real opportunities, although it's not going to be easy in many places. There are not the policies in place. But I think we need to move to greater integration of transportation, energy, and communications, as well as other sectors. But those are critical in terms of infrastructure development. And wherever there's an opportunity for integration, we should look at how to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
So just a quick thing. In Southern California in the San Diego County, we do not have a great relationship with our power company. We were deploying fiber in East County, and it would have been about a 2-month job, cover to cover. It's a 1/4 mile, and it took a year. The fiber was in the ground, ditch was dug, everything was ready. It took the power company a year to deliver the power. And you know, just every story I hear from all the tribal leaders in Southern California, it's the same process. It doesn't matter what it is, they just drag their feet. It's the barrier to completion on timing.
So I want to say thank you. I have one more question, actually just real quick, and it's for the people that are here. I want to really kind of direct it toward Geoffrey. Engaging policymakers. In Canada, the CRTC. In the United States, the FCC. What kind of recommendations or how would you mentor somebody that wants to start talking to the FCC? You know, how can they begin the conversation? You know, what are the things that what can you lend to the group that wants to engage with the regulators of their country?
So there are really sort of 3 things I would say. The first is find somebody who likes to read. If you're not the person that likes to read, don't. That's not you. you. What do they say now? The average American attention span is 7 seconds. So I've already lost everybody. But No, sometimes this is heavy lifting. This is the deep end of the pool stuff, so there is background to read. The other thing that I would, so if you want to get up to speed on the lifeline issues, for instance, it's not thousands of pages, but it's probably 100 pages that's critically important to understand what's really happening. And that includes not just what the federal government is saying, what the FCC is saying, but that's what industry is saying, and the private sector is saying, and the tribes are saying, and the tribal industry is saying, to get a picture of the entire issue. It's like you want to approach this as a lesson plan, and you take a look at a particular rulemaking and read some of the comments. The other thing is, and I want to extend an invitation, I should have said, I'd like to invite folks to come to our meetings at Native Public Media if you're interested in starting a radio station or getting involved in online media. Native Public Media is an association of all the tribal radio stations in the United States and several online media outlets. It's a place where there's a lot of sharing and there's a policy component to it, the discussion around media policy. The other invitation I'd like to extend is to the Telecommunications and Technology Subcommittee of the National Congress of American Indians, which has been working for about 15 years to develop the platform for tribal telecommunications policy that I would say probably covers around 80% in common in different places. Now, there are many specific issues that are particular to certain regions or areas of the country. The third thing I would say is show up in person. Sometimes the decisions are made in small circles. I don't know about in Canada, but our Federal Communications Commission is only 1,500 people. And that is, compared to the Department of Agriculture, it's a speck. And when you start talking about the regulators and the decision-making circles, it's precious few people. And so it's always, it's seen as being pretty consanguine. And sometimes the positive side of that, though, is that relationships can get built pretty quickly, but it's an area that is very substantive. So with that, with those invitations, and I'm sure we can help spread the word about where there are aggregations of tribal leaders like at NCAI who get together and policymakers who talk about this policy, and it's a very welcoming environment. These are steep learning curves, but they're pretty short learning curves if you're willing to read. Thanks.
Thank you. Lyle, Godfrey?
Oh, and I would also say NTTA, National Tribal Telecommunications Association, is a policy-making organization. I would say attend their meetings as well.
Procedure. What happens with NPRM or
Okay. Okay. So
there is a policymaking process under the Administrative Procedure Act in the U.S. that rulemakings are done through notice and comment period. Typically, there's a comment period, and then everybody gets to see what everybody else said, and then there's a reply comment period, and then I kind of think of it as peaks and valleys, and then the FCC will come out with a rulemaking, and then there's also opportunities where organizations will file petitions for reconsideration. Those will be put out for public comment, and so on and so on. So I don't know when in the English language process the plural of processes became plural processes, but that is certainly the truth about the regulatory field at the FCC. Many processes.
Oh, thank you, Godfrey. Thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you, Lyle. Sally, if you're still there. Oh, Sally, thank you. Sally, you there? Sally, can you hear us? I think we lost Sally. I'm sorry. Thank you. A round of applause for our panel here. So I want to say a personal thank you for everybody that has come and the engagement that we've had. I hope you've been able to come away with an understanding of what community networks, understanding of some of the barriers, understanding of the cultural preservation and some of the topics. I want to thank Mark. Everybody give Mark a round of applause again for Internet Society.
Okay.
We've got our tech